On February 18, 2024, at around 9 a.m., Chicago police officers responded to a call in the alley behind the 8200 block of South Vernon Avenue in the Chatham neighborhood on the city's south side. The morning was cold and gray, typical for a Chicago winter, with patches of old snow clinging to the edges of dumpsters and chain-link fences. When officers arrived, they found a young woman lying between two trash cans, her body partially obscured by debris. She had visible injuries to her neck area, and there was no pulse. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The victim was later identified as 24-year-old Itzel Camarena, a vibrant young woman who was 6 months pregnant with her first child. Itzel's life had been one of quiet determination. Born and raised in Chicago, she came from a close-knit family that valued hard work and loyalty. Her mother, Vanessa Sanchez, often described her as the heart of their household, a young woman who dreamed of becoming a nurse and raising a family of her own. Itzel had recently begun a new chapter in her life, expecting a baby boy, and those around her said the pregnancy had brought a special glow to her. She was excited, talking endlessly about baby names, tiny clothes, and the future she envisioned. Friends recalled how she would rub her growing belly and smile, saying the baby was already kicking like a soccer player. But on that fateful February morning, those dreams were violently shattered. Investigators quickly pieced together the events leading up to the discovery. Itzel had gone to visit 26-year-old Dontrell Anderson that morning. The two were in a relationship, and she had stopped by the apartment where Anderson was staying with family members in the same Chatham neighborhood. What began as a routine visit turned deadly. According to prosecutors, Anderson allegedly strangled Itzel before shooting her while she was seated on a couch inside the residence. The Cook County Medical Examiner's office later determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the face, though initial observations at the scene noted trauma to the neck consistent with strangulation. The brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned detectives. Strangulation suggested a prolonged, intimate act of violence, followed by the cold efficiency of a gunshot at close range. Itzel had been vulnerable, pregnant, and trusting enough to enter the space where she believed she was safe. Instead, she met a horrifying end. A blood-stained couch cushion was recovered from the apartment, hinting at the struggle that had taken place. Surveillance video from the area captured the aftermath in chilling detail. Anderson wrapping Itzel's body in a white sheet and dragging it out of the home and into the alley, attempting to conceal it behind dumpsters as if discarding unwanted trash. The video evidence was damning. It showed a man methodically moving the limp form, the sheet trailing behind like a makeshift shroud. Neighbors later reported hearing nothing unusual that morning. No screams, no arguments that stood out amid the usual sounds of the city waking up. Chatham, a community known for its strong families and resilient spirit, was left reeling from the violence that had unfolded in its midst. Police canvassed the area, speaking to residents who expressed disbelief that such a crime could happen so brazenly in broad daylight. Dontrell Anderson, described by some as a troubled young man with a history of run-ins with the law, became the prime suspect almost immediately. He fled the scene after disposing of the body, eventually making his way to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, about 170 miles north of Chicago. There, on April 5, 2024, he was arrested by local authorities and extradited back to Illinois. Upon his return, he faced charges of first-degree murder and concealing a homicidal death. The initial charges reflected the premeditated nature of the killing and the callous cover-up that followed. Prosecutors argued that Anderson had not only taken Itzel's life but also that of her unborn child, though Illinois law at the time complicated additional fetal homicide charges in certain contexts. As the case moved through the Cook County court system, details emerged about the relationship between Itzel and Anderson. Friends and family described it as turbulent at times, with moments of affection overshadowed by arguments and jealousy. Itzel had confided in close ones about wanting stability for her baby, perhaps hoping the pregnancy would encourage Anderson to step up. But tensions had been building. On the morning of the killing, something snapped. Authorities alleged Anderson threatened her with a firearm before the fatal shot. The exact sequence, strangulation followed by shooting, painted a picture of escalating rage, a moment where control turned to destruction. The investigation faced hurdles common in urban homicide cases. Recovering the weapon proved elusive, though the blood evidence and video were strong. Anderson's defense team began scrutinizing every procedural step, looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. Months turned into years as pretrial motions dragged on. Anderson remained in custody, his court appearances becoming routine stops in a system overloaded with violent crime. By early 2026, the case took a dramatic turn. On April 15, 2026, Dontrell Anderson stood before a judge and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and one count of concealing a homicidal death. The plea deal stunned many who had followed the story. Instead of facing the full weight of first-degree murder charges, which could have carried a much longer sentence or even life in prison, Anderson accepted a reduced plea. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison to be served at 50%, meaning he could be eligible for release after serving roughly half that time. He was also given credit for 916 days already spent in custody awaiting trial. The courtroom was tense that day. Itzel's family sat in the gallery, their faces etched with a mix of exhaustion and fury. Vanessa Sanchez, Itzel's mother, could barely contain her emotions. After the hearing, she spoke to reporters outside the courthouse, her voice breaking as she recounted what prosecutors had told her. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office had explained that Anderson's Miranda rights had been violated during his arrest or interrogation process. This procedural error, they said, jeopardized the admissibility of key statements or evidence, forcing the office to offer the plea to secure some measure of accountability rather than risk an acquittal or a weakened trial. "Nothing will bring my daughter and my grandbaby back," Sanchez said, tears streaming down her face. "They told me his rights were violated, so this is what we get. 19 years? He strangled her, shot her in the face, dragged her body like she was nothing, and now he's getting a deal? My baby was 6 months pregnant. She had a whole life ahead. This isn't justice." Family members echoed her outrage. Itzel's siblings and cousins described the plea as a slap in the face to victims' families across Chicago, where gun violence and lenient deals had become all too familiar. They pointed to the surveillance video as irrefutable proof of intent and concealment, questioning how a Miranda violation could so drastically alter the outcome. In their eyes, the system had failed Itzel twice. Once when it couldn't protect her from violence, and again when it couldn't deliver full punishment for her killer. The broader context of the case highlighted ongoing debates in Chicago's criminal justice system. The city had long grappled with high rates of homicide, particularly on the South Side, where communities like Chatham bore the brunt of gang activity, domestic disputes, and easy access to firearms. Prosecutors often faced criticism for both being too aggressive in charging and too willing to plea down serious cases due to evidentiary issues, overloaded courts, or policy shifts under various administrations. The violation of Miranda rights, the requirement to inform suspects of their right to remain silent and to an attorney, is a cornerstone of constitutional protections, but when it leads to suppressed evidence in a clear-cut case, it leaves families feeling betrayed. Anderson's attorneys, while not commenting extensively post-plea, likely argued that any statements made without proper warnings tainted the investigation. Without those, the prosecution's leverage diminished, leading to the involuntary manslaughter charge, which implies recklessness rather than intentional murder. Concealing the homicidal death added a concurrent sentence, but overall, the deal allowed Anderson to avoid the harshest penalties. In the days following the plea, community activists and victims' advocates rallied in support of the Camarena family. Vigils were held near the alley where Itzel's body was found, with candles and photos of her smiling face placed alongside stuffed animals symbolizing the lost grandchild. "She was carrying life, and he took it all away," one speaker said at a gathering. "The baby never got a chance to breathe, and now the man who did this gets to breathe free someday soon." Itzel's story resonated beyond Chicago. National outlets picked up on the tragedy of a pregnant woman killed by her partner, a pattern seen too often in domestic violence cases across the country. Statistics from organizations tracking such crimes show that homicide is a leading cause of death for pregnant women, often at the hands of intimate partners. Itzel's case fit that grim profile. A young mother-to-be caught in a moment of escalating conflict with no escape. Friends remembered Itzel as more than a victim. She was the one who organized family barbecues, the one who loved dancing to Latin music, the one who volunteered at local shelters when she could. Her pregnancy had made her even more community-oriented. She talked about teaching her son to be kind in a world that wasn't always fair. Itzel had so much love to give, a childhood friend said. She didn't deserve this. No one does. As Anderson begins his sentence in an Illinois Department of Corrections facility, questions linger about what truly happened in that apartment on South Vernon Avenue. Was it a spontaneous explosion of anger or something more calculated? The strangled neck and facial gunshot suggest fury mixed with a desire to silence. The dragging of the body in a sheet points to panic and a desperate attempt to buy time. The flight to Wisconsin shows awareness of guilt. For the Camarena family, the fight isn't over. They plan to advocate for changes in how procedural errors are handled in violent crime cases, pushing for reforms that prioritize victims' rights without undermining constitutional safeguards. Vanessa Sanchez has become a vocal voice, sharing Itzel's story at community events and with legislators, hoping to prevent other families from enduring the same pain. Chicago itself continues to wrestle with its crime challenges. In 2024 and beyond, the city saw fluctuations in homicide rates, with efforts from police, community groups, and City Hall focusing on prevention, intervention, and smarter prosecution. Cases like Itzel's underscore the human cost when those efforts fall short. When a young woman visits her partner expecting support and instead meets death. The alley on South Vernon Avenue has quieted since that February morning. Residents pass by the spot where Itzel was found, some pausing to remember the pregnant woman whose life ended too soon. Flowers occasionally appear, left by strangers moved by the news. The white sheet and blood-stained cushion are long gone, but the memory endures. Dontrell Anderson's plea deal closes one chapter legally, but for Itzel's loved ones, the wound remains open. They mourn not just her, but the grandson who never got to meet the world, the tiny life snuffed out before it began. In their grief, they hold onto Itzel's spirit, her smile, her dreams, her resilience. She was 6 months pregnant, her mother often repeats. She was building a future. He took that away, and the system gave him a discount on justice. As the years pass, Itzel Camarena's name will join the lists of victims remembered in Chicago's annual memorials for the slain. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the dangers lurking in personal relationships, and the imperfections of a justice system tasked with balancing rights and retribution. For one family in Chatham, April 15, 2026, marked not an ending, but another painful milestone in a journey toward healing that may never fully come.